Thank you for joining us. This is Let's Talk Climate, and this episode is the second of 3 in a series Blessed Tomorrow is offering on environmental justice. Environmental justice is the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. In this series, we are featuring different perspectives in the hopes that we will all have a deeper understanding that supports us in the work for justice for all people and all creation. All of these episodes will be available on ecoAmerica's YouTube channel for you to watch and share widely. If you missed the first episode, please check it out. Thank you. Oh, and welcome to Let's Talk Climate, a weekly webcast series from ecoAmerica featuring dynamic discussions with local and national leaders. We offer diverse perspectives and bring forth the latest thinking and best practices for building public support and political resolve for equitable climate solutions in the U.S. Please engage with us online using the hashtag Let's Talk Climate. I'm Reverend Carol Devine. I'm an ordained minister in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, the director of Blessed Tomorrow at ecoAmerica. And I live in Lexington, Kentucky, on the traditional lands of the Adena, Hopewell, Yuki, Shawnee, and Cherokee people. I am honored today to be joined by the Reverend Dr. Loida Martell. Dr. Martell was the first female veterinarian in Puerto Rico. She's an ordained Baptist minister and has served as a pastor and is now the vice president and dean of academic affairs at Lexington Theological Seminary. Welcome, Dr. Martell, and thank you so much for being here. And I'm just going to jump right in because I really want to hear from you and just be one who, again, I've learned so much from you. I want today to be a learning opportunity for myself and everyone listening. I'm sure you know the famous quote by Gus Speth, but I think it's really helpful to hear from a climate scientist who's also an agnostic, who said, I thought that 30 years of good science could address these climate problems. I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with these, we need a cultural and spiritual transformation. And we scientists don't know how to do that. As a veterinary doctor and as a theologian, what are your thoughts?
I think he's absolutely right. I think that where we are right now in climate change has been long in the making. Mm-hmm. And you know, as far back as 1996, Russell Means, who was an indigenous activist, the late Russell Means, said something to the effect that we were committing suicide because we were attacking Mother Earth, and eventually it was going to come back to us, and we were all going to suffer the consequences of that. And even as recently as last year, Antonio Guterres, who's the General Secretary of the UN, said something very similar to that, to the effect that, you know, we're damaging the earth, we're committing sort of a global suicide, and this is gonna, you know, we're attacking the planet, and it's a form of global suicide. Specifically said, humanity is waging war on nature. This is suicidal. Nature always strikes back, and it's already doing so with force and fury. Let me think theologically about this, right? And that's when I started thinking about globalization. What is globalization? And I started looking at scripture, and I remembered two very important texts in the Bible that sort of spoke to me about globalization, theologically about globalization. The first one is a very interesting text because the disciples are talking to Jesus, right? They're asking Jesus about the last days. And they want to know all the signs. Everybody's always concerned about the last days. It seems to me we're so concerned about the last days, we're not paying attention to the present days. Yeah. But that's a whole other thing. But they're asking him about the last days. And just before he gets into that whole issue about what are the signs and things like that, he said something very interesting. And he said, the world will come to a point of greed and lawlessness such that the love of many will grow cold. Mm. And that was very interesting to me because he did not say that love will go away. He did not say that love will die. He said that love will grow cold. And I had to think about that. What does it mean for love to grow cold?
Right.
And I thought about the days that we're living in, when I said, yes, that's right. Love has grown cold. And so what is a love that has grown cold? A love that has grown cold is a love that pays attention to me and mine. The parable of the Samaritan. So a bunch of people come up to Jesus and they say, well, how am I saved? And this lawyer comes to Jesus and he says, how can I be saved? Right. And I thought, yeah, see, that's a cold love. He's not worried about anybody else's salvation. He's worried about his salvation, right? How can I be saved? He's worried about himself and those who are like him.
Yes.
And so Jesus says, well, you know the law, you know what you got to do. And he says, well, I obey the commandments. I love God with all my might. He says, well, there you go. You're well on your way. He says, yes, but what else must I do? And so Jesus gives him this, the parable of the Samaritan. You know that parable. I know that parable. There's this man beaten up on the roadside, and these three groups of people passing by, and we're too busy, or we're too pure, or we're too whatever. We just go on our way. Mm-hmm. And then the one person who's hated by the community, the one person that nobody else respects in that community, which is a Samaritan, sees this person beat up. And it's very interesting. He has to cross the road. So first of all, he has to cross borders. He has to go out of his way. He has to cross whatever barriers are between him and that person. Yeah. And then he takes care of that person. And then he takes that person to a safe place. Right. And he gives of his wealth to and he says to the innkeeper, here, I'm going to pay for everything for that person's care before he moves on. He makes sure that person's okay. And so Jesus says, so at first when Jesus says, well, you know what you got to do, you love your neighbor. And so the guy goes, who is my neighbor? So everything is about me. What do I have to do and who is my neighbor? When Jesus finishes the parable, Jesus turns that question around and he asks the question, who are you neighbor to? Right? Yeah. So for love not to be cold, we have to stop thinking about who is my neighbor? What is my problem? What do I need? And we have to start thinking about what are the borders that I need to cross and who do I need to be neighbor to? Right. We're concerned about me and mine. Right. And why are we not concerned about the environment? Because it has nothing to do with me and mine. It has nothing to do with me and my benefit, my immediate me and my benefit. It has nothing to do with me and my immediate tribe, right? I cannot conceive of crossing a border and learning about something else, somebody else's need, and to tend to that, because it doesn't affect me and mine, except that now it is, right? Now this pandemic has permeated you and yours. Mm-hmm. So number one, we have to move away from meism, from money theism. We have to sort of dismantle this ideology of globalization. In fact, it's such an ideology that Pope Francis has called it a globalization of indifference.
Mm,
We don't care about the other.
right.
We don't, in fact, we see the other as the enemy. We only care about the other to the point of, can we exploit them? We need to dismantle this globalization of indifference, this meism, right? Because that same spirit of exploitation is how we treat the planet.
Right.
We need to start thinking about the planet as a living being. We need to start thinking about others as living beings. Let me give it a deeper theological turn here. When God created the cosmos. God created the heavens and the earth. And God said, it is good.
Yes.
And when God created every living being. That included the planet, that included the vegetation. Right? In the words of in the language of indigenous people, God created the four-legged, the two-legged, and the winged, all those things. And God said, it is good. God created a community to become a community with God who is community. God created a diverse community, and God said it was good. All of creation is imbued with God's love and God's care and God's divineness, if you will.
God's self. Mm-hmm.
God's self. The creation is imbued with God's grace, with God's selflessness.
Mm-hmm.
So when we exploit things, when we exploit the earth, when we exploit the other, when we attack the other, when we live out this ideology of global indifference and meism and cold love, we are living what we could actually call an anti-evangelicalism. And what I mean by that is we are living against the gospel. We are living against the vision that God had when God created the world.
Yeah.
We're sort of going against the very vision that God had, right? And I can almost say that we are making God weep. God weeps, right? Letty Russell said that God wakes every morning because God is concerned with mending creation. Mm. And we can partner with God to mend creation, or we can resist God and continue to rend creation apart. And we do that with this spirit of monotheism, with this spirit of meism, with this cold love.
Yes.
But we can hear Jesus call and continuously ask the question, who should I be neighbor to?
Yes.
And I can be a neighbor to the planet, and I can be a neighbor to my neighbor, and I can be a neighbor to the suffering world. I can be a neighbor to the suffering children of Uvalde, Texas. Yes. I can be a neighbor to the suffering people of Ukraine. I can learn to be empathic and a neighbor too, even though that means that I weep with God who weeps on a daily basis for the mending of creation. And in a sense, that's my call to the world. Let us have a hot love. We have a hot love, then we don't treat the environment with indifference.
Right.
And then hopefully our politicians don't whiffle waffle over the issue of gun control, because how many times do we have to weep over our children being slaughtered unnecessarily? I mean, that is devastating.
Yes. When we think about environmental issues too, the ones that are impacted first and the greatest are our children, our people of color.
For those listening to us, I don't want you to walk away hopeless and say, oh my gosh, there's nothing here to do. I think that there are a lot of things in scripture that give us pointers of how to respond, right? First of all, I think we need to stop exploiting ourselves and the planet. There's a concept called the Sabbath rest. And there's a concept called Jubilee that calls us to rest. And there's so many other tools. And that's exactly why we at LTS decided to create this master's in pastoral studies in creation care and eco-theology. We want people to look at these issues of creation care and injustice and cold love versus hot love, and to rediscover the grace of God's love in the fabric of creation. We want people to discover these tools for themselves and to be able to say, okay, now that I've got tools, now I've got practical ways to respond to these issues, rather than wringing my hands and going, oh my gosh, what can I do? I'm just one person, right? Which is how we often react to these things.
Right.
I'm just one person, what can I do?
Right.
So we created this degree for lay people, particularly, but for anyone who's interested in these topics, to empower them, to empower their churches, to empower their communities. This is more than a degree, for me at least. This is hopefully a way to cooperate with you and others who are trying to create a movement to save our planet and to save our children, to save our future. So this is a 2-year program, and I rather than say 2-year, let me just say it's a 40 credit program. And you take 8 courses, core courses that are specifically around biblical studies and theological studies, and those kinds of courses specifically around the topic related to creation care and theology. So there's for example, a course on Bible creation and justice. There's another one on food justice and food injustice. There's one that you are going to teach with with Dr. Shade on how do you develop a green congregation. So we've got some very exciting courses.
Yes, thank you so much. And Lexington Theological Seminary has honestly been leading in this area for a long, long time. And I'm very grateful for the incredible education, but also the modeling that happens there for people of faith all over. And so thank you so much, Dr. Martell, for spending some time with us and for allowing us to learn from you. And just thank you for who you are and how you lead in all the various places that you find yourself on justice issues. And the world is just such a better place because you're in it. And I'm just so grateful. And so I can't believe that our time is past, but we will wrap it up now. So I just would say to our listeners, please check out the description below. Let us know what you think. Engage with us online. Again, #Let'sTalkClimate. And be sure to subscribe and follow Blessed Tomorrow for the latest thoughtful leadership, resources, and episodes on climate action and advocacy. So from all of us here at ecoAmerica and Blessed Tomorrow, thank you for being with us. People of faith are the perfect leaders for climate solutions. We all stand on God's holy ground together, and we need everyone every day. Thank you.